A presentation on the economic ramifications and solutions to clean water and sanitation in sub-Saharan Africa. In order to achieve other Millennium Goals set out by the United Nations, the central idea within all of them is a requirement for all people to have access to clean water and appropriate sanitation facilities. From sustainable economic development to gender equality, solving Africa's water issues will aid in the implementation of other strategies to address other goals within the Millennium Goals project. Over 280 million people, or 28% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa, have limited or no access to clean drinking water. Furthermore, some 420 million people, or 40% of the population, have little or no access to sanitation facilities. Without access to clean water and appropriate sanitation facilities, the ability to progress further in terms of health, economics, gender equality, and environmental sustainability is limited. The current situation of magnitude faced by Africa regarding access to clean water and appropriate sanitation facilities is one that needs to be addressed on a holistic and global approach. Within this report, issues pertaining to the economic effects and various other challenges need to be addressed. Furthermore, the combined approaches of the United Nations, the African Union, individual federal governments and other global groups and organisations need to be addressed as well, with regards to how they are furthering the development of the United Nations Development Goals, pertaining to access to clean water and appropriate sanitation facilities. A key term that often gets used when discussing the economic fallout and effects of poor water quality and sanitation is the water poverty trap. Africa's situation is unique in that sub-Saharan Africa is the poorest region in the world, with half of the world's poorest people living in 5 countries, 3 of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. Incidentally, these countries are also the most heavily populated in sub-Saharan Africa, according to Katayama and Wadwa 2019. Reasons behind this are centered around a lack of basic human resources such as clean water and sanitation. Hutton 2012 states that the global economic losses as a result of poor water supply, quality and sanitation is estimated to be approximately 4.3% of sub-Saharan Africa's nominal GDP, or approximately $110 billion per year. These costs come about through the costs on governments to care for sick citizens, as well as the cost for families through loss of income and medical costs, and finally, a loss in productivity and revenue for businesses, as they lose members of a workforce through preventable illnesses. The United Nations is currently working hard to solve issues surrounding access to clean water and sanitation in sub-Saharan Africa. And with the inception of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in June of 1992, there have been more than 170 of the 193 United Nations member states take on these development goals, adopting a comprehensive plan to achieve a global partnership in sustainable development to improve quality of life and protect the environment. Through this, the United Nations has worked to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all, according to the UNEDSA 1992, or the United Nations Department of Economic Affairs. According to the United Nations Department of Economic Affairs, in 2016 it became imperative that the United Nations and the UNDEA developed a practical starting point for the implementation of various strategies in an effort to achieve a goal of universal and equitable access to safe drinking water for everyone by 2030. The achievement of this 2030 goal will also run concurrently with the working on and achievement of appropriate sanitation facilities. As suggested in the above figure proportion of population using basic water and sanitation services, the provision of basic water and sanitation falls well below the global mean, with the exception of fragile states in Oceania. Sub-Saharan Africa falls amongst the worst in the world for the provision and access to these resources. It was because of the presence of data like this that sparked the development of the guidelines associated with the Development Goal number 6 pertaining to clean water and sanitation. This figure suggests that the majority of funding being invested into clean water and sanitation is government funded, with funds coming from the central bodies such as the African Union and the United Nations as well. Furthermore, in September of 2018, the African Union announced a $10 billion fund to support infrastructure associated with the delivery of clean water and appropriate sanitation facilities. This was achieved through various avenues of funding, including the African Development Bank and the UN Economic Commission for Africa. International funding into the sub-Saharan region was done based on the African Union's Agenda 2063, an Africa-specific set of goals set to be achieved by 2063. The extra funding was designed to aid in achieving goals associated with developing a strong and functioning economy, the emergence of a competitive economy, higher employment opportunities, and the development of a more socio-economic environment. Poll 2018. It was also suggested that these goals associated with said funding will in fact stem from greater access to clean water and appropriate sanitation facilities. In 2017, the World Bank, in partnership with 20 of the world's leading economies, G20, announced a $57 billion fund in financing major infrastructure projects in sub-Saharan Africa, including upgrading water infrastructure projects and sanitation availability. The German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development also installed a Sub-Saharan Africa Fund, giving significant aid to governing bodies within the region, with significant aid being given to the Water Directorate of the African Union, with the goal of providing access to clean water for an additional 5 million people and sanitation to a further 5 million people on top of that. In conclusion, as the world continues to grow and change, it is imperative that countries and regions that were previously left behind are given every chance to grow, and the people within these countries must be provided with basic human necessities, including fresh, safe and drinkable water, as well as safe and well-managed sanitation facilities. Through various sources of funding and sustainable and attainable development goals, the United Nations, in conjunction with various economic and humanitarian aid corporations, are working towards the development of clean, safe, sustainable drinking water and sanitation facilities. It is believed that through developing equitable and safe solutions to these issues, further development in terms of economics and political stability should ensue. Below is a list of references used for the collation of data and development of ideas used within this presentation. Below is a bibliography with a list of sources utilised for the collection of information for this presentation.